Hello, Cornerbrook, and welcome to the Stage Door in our fourth segment now with the Graham Academy here to take part in the Q&A portion. This week, we are thrilled to have a familiar face to Cornerbrook and Newfoundland, but a familiar face to New York City and Broadway as well in recent years, Petrina Bromley. So welcome, Petrina, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. I love Cornerbrook. I've spent a lot of time out there, and there's such an incredibly vibrant and active art scene out there. It's wonderful to be able to be a part of it again in even a small way.
Absolutely, and us at the Graham Academy are thrilled to have been now for the past 4 years, been kind of building that art scene with a musical theater program and a choral program, and now bucket drumming is a program we started this year.
Fantastic.
So lots of excitement going on here with the Graham Academy. So Petrina, I always start interviews with this question, and it's always a toughie but a goodie. And it is, what was the first moment for you that you looked at theater and were like, hey, this is something that I am going to do?
Honestly, I was in kindergarten and we did like a Christmas pageant or a year-end pageant or something like that. And it was all like, we did the alphabet, we did numbers or whatever. And I remember there was a thing on nursery rhymes, and I played Little Boy Blue. I went to it was an all-girls school at the time. And I was Little Boy Blue, probably because I owned a blue jumpsuit at the time. But I remember lying on the stage during the performance and like opening one eye and seeing my parents and kind of going, this is really cool. And I think there was some time not long after that I thought, I have to keep doing this, whatever this is. Because I remember in like primary school, we had like an after school or a lunchtime drama group, and I joined it. It was like, I'm doing it. And I was pretty much seeking it out every moment I could after that.
Fabulous. And we actually do have a couple primary students with us here. Our Starlights
Awesome.
and Rising Stars they start at junior kindergarten and
amazing.
They go up to grade 2. So we have a couple of our Rising Stars online now watching. So you can be inspired at any time.
Yeah, no, that's totally cool.
Yeah, so Petrina, I guess we'll have to talk about Cornerbrook since you're on a Cornerbrook-based show right now. So what has been your multiple now experiences with Cornerbrook and Cornerbrook Theater?
Well, oh my gosh, I guess the first thing I did out in Cornerbrook was years ago with TNL. I went out to do, Jillian Kiley was asked to come out and direct oh my gosh, a couple of Mighton's Possible Worlds, and a script that Torkel Kobo, who is a local guy, had also written called, oh shoot, something about a zoo. I can't remember, that's terrible. I should remember. It was a one-man show, but we all did like effects and noise and stuff while he did the show. And we did those kind of in tandem because I think they were both one acts. And that would have been to do in the 90s, I don't know, sometime in there, somewhere like maybe 1997 or 8 or something around there. And then not long after that, I came back out and was musical director and also was in Man of La Mancha when TNL did it out there. And then I came back a few years later I was the director for Annie. Amy, who's on the call here, Amy Andrews, was the choreographer, and the wonderful Mr. Gary Graham was the musical director. So I did Annie, I did Bye Bye Birdie, I did The Sound of Music. I think that's it. I did 3 musicals out there that I directed. And I've been to Cornerbrook many, many times. I have family out there, and I toured with Rising Tide with Review for many years and went through the Arts and Culture Center there many, many times with Review. So yeah, I know a lot of people from Cornerbrook. I've spent a lot of time out there. It's a great city. It's a great little town.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of Rising Tide, you've had a wealth of experience out there with Rising Tide, Seasons in the Bite, with Donna Butt out in Trinity. For those who don't know, it's a wonderful festival that's happened, for many years now, review included. And it's been a lot of original work that has come to light after being workshopped there. So Petrina, what's it like to, be in those workshop productions? Because of course you got to do it there, and then you got to do it with Come From Away to some extent.
Yeah, no, it's something that I don't know if it's particular to Newfoundland, but one of the things that happens with a lot of regularity in Newfoundland is we create our own work. And it means that a lot of the stuff that's being done at these summer festivals like Cowhead and Trinity, Grand Bank, Stephenville, these places are producing brand new Newfoundland work. And there's nothing that compares to working on a brand new piece, because you really get to understand what it takes to put a piece of theater together. It's one thing to read your lines and get your music and go, oh, this is what it is. And it's really another thing to sit there with the writer and go, but why? Why am I saying that? But why is the character doing that? But why does this have to happen? And have them be able to tell you what their intention was when they wrote it. Or if you're the writer yourself, to be able to tell other people, no, it has to be like this. So the interpretation of it is a lot more literally what the writer had in mind than sometimes you get with scripts that are in existence and you just get the script. Because when you just get the script, you try and follow what it says and what the stage directions are, but you put a little bit of how you see it in there too. And that does happen with developing a new script too, but it's really incredible to watch things change and grow. We rehearsed for Come From Away in La Jolla. When we first rehearsed, we actually did a whole entire different opening number, learned it, choreographed it. We spent the tech time actually lighting it. We rehearsed it, and then they never put it in. Because they weren't happy with the opening number. They were just like, I don't know, that's not everything we wanted to do. So they tried something else. And then once they tried something else, they realized, oh no, what we had was actually really good. Trying to change it is a very bad idea. So it's cool to see that side of things too, when you realize that you've done something wrong and you can change it and fix it and make it better. So yeah, it's a really cool thing to be a part of that process. And to know that you're part of something that is happening for the first time.
Absolutely. And I know you guys, I think recently, maybe at 54 Below, some of the Come From Away crew recorded that in concert. They performed that opening number that never was.
Yeah, we did an evening of cut from away songs, which were songs that had been part of either the Sheridan process earlier on or things that had been cut from when we were in our first rehearsals. Yeah. There's tons of stuff that never made it. That wasn't even half of, a lot of it is just lines and scenes and things, but there's a lot of stuff that ended up getting cut out. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to, I was in a workshop with David Ferry a little while ago, and of course he did the Sheridan show, and it was a totally different show, and his vision of it would have been, I'm sure, very different from Christopher Ashley's for the show as a whole. So it's fascinating to see the journey of that show.
Yeah, I think it goes to show you what one person's influence can do. Like depending on who the director is, depending on who a designer is, depending on who, all the different pieces that make the show, one of those person's input can make incredibly different choices, and they're not good or bad, they're just different.
Yeah, and speaking of Broadway and shows being developed, with Grossborn Summer Music here in Corner Brook, I had the opportunity to work on a show that was redeveloped from a show that you were in Trinity by Jody Richardson called The King of Broadway.
King of Broadway,
which, is it's one of my favorite Newfoundland stories I found about this impossible legend of a man. And, it's great to kind of mention that. So what's it like to be, in this generation, one of the Newfoundlanders on Broadway?
I still don't believe it. especially now sitting here again in my house in St. John's. I'm like, was that like a dream thing that I had where I was like living in New York for 3 years? I think that was a dream. Yeah, no, it's still very surreal to me that it has happened, and that it potentially will start up again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, of course, in this shutdown, it must be, and luckily Broadway Cares did a big fundraiser just on Saturday, or no, today's Saturday, on Friday, for them with the Disney 25 years. So, it's wonderful to have the support of, every artist is kind of rallying for each other at this time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's hard times for everybody. And thankfully, we do have that organization, Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, in New York, which is for the whole country in the States. And in Canada, there's something that's pretty close to being equal, called the Actors Fund of Canada, which also is there as a kind of like a safety net for people in the arts in difficult times.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if anyone watching wants to donate some funds to one of those beautiful, beautiful organizations, artists everywhere will appreciate that. It means the world to all of us in this time, and we're fortunate to be able to share in moments like this as well. So, Petrina, I'd like to talk a little bit about Artistic Fraud, which is a wonderful, wonderful Newfoundland company. I have a couple of the scripts behind me. One of my favorites, and I saw the remount of this one, is Under Wraps. And my cousin Greg was in the remount when I saw it. And cool. You did the score to that was yours, and it was all voices, and it was completely brilliant. So before we go into the score, I will let everyone watching know the whole show has 2 actors and a chorus of people that are under a sheet that make everything else. So, and Petrina did the vocal score, which is all done through vocalization. So, Petrina, what was it like diving into that world to create that?
Oh, it was crazy. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. We made that up entirely from nothing. It was a while ago. We were all kind of just out of university, I think, or still in university anyway. And Jill had the idea that she wanted to have a chorus of people who acted like a Greek chorus and commented on the activity of the show. And they were all hidden. You couldn't see them. They were all hidden under this giant, like, in the school when you played parachute and you pull up the parachute and you run under, it was exactly like that, like a big parachute. And all of the chorus were underneath it. And the 2 main actors were on top. So you could see them, but we couldn't see us. And we made shapes with cardboard and our bodies underneath, so that if suddenly this scene was in the coffee shop is one of the main sets that happens, we all pop up into these little shapes that are like little cafe tables and a counter. And there's a shape behind the counter checking you in and all that sort of stuff. So there's kind of, a lot of it looked like, when you go to a summer house and the furniture's all been covered over. It's all covered in blankets. But because it was a white sheet, and Leanne Vardy was our lighting designer, she was able to make these incredible images appear, because it's all, the texture of the lighting against that white sheet just is magical. It's totally magical. It fills the whole room with shades and tones and colors to set the mood for every scene. But basically, Jill, I went to music school here in St. John's, to MUN Music. So my degree is music. And I had a real interest in choral music and in choral composing and choral conducting. And so the original idea for her was that it would be a cappella, meaning no instruments, just voices, unaccompanied. Except maybe we'd have a bass and maybe a drummer. And I think we tried like once to do that, and it was so impossible to make it happen, because if you've ever sung in a choir, what is the thing you look at when you're in choir? The conductor. So everybody under the sheet is looking at the sheet. Like you can only see the floor if you very carefully like billow out the thing in front of you. And there was a big grid on the floor, so we were always going to like H5 or N3 or whatever, like a big bingo card. And So it was chaos to try and think that we'd be able to, with tuning forks, run around and give ourselves notes and also make Barba Papa shapes under this thing. So we defaulted to piano, just accompanying everybody. And it ended up working for the better, certainly to keep us together and in tune, but it also, it drove it forward. Just the rhythmic sound of the piano really, really drove it forward in times when that needed to be. But yeah, no, every bit of music in that is supposed to be reflective of the emotional content of the scene. So it's all mood music to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of those theatrical moments that certainly stuck with me when I saw it. It was just as Artistic Fraud often is, it's such a unique experience seeing their shows. And of course, you've been involved in many productions with Artistic Fraud through the years.
Yeah.
So what has it been like to work with the same company, Artistic Fraud of Newfoundland, for such a long time as they evolve and grow and change?
It's really great because in a lot of ways you're just working with your friends. So you get to keep making art with the people who you really understand and who really understand you, and you develop a shorthand so that you don't have to go into really long explanations of, no, what I'm trying to say is this. You can often just say, no, it's like that time when we tried to do this thing. Remember that? And why that didn't work? This is exactly that again. So you save a lot of time in a lot of ways, and you get to know what you can demand and expect of each other. So it does make things run a lot easier in a lot of ways, and you get to really rely on people in a way that we often don't in theater, because you're moving from gig to gig and place to place and not really spending a whole lot of time. I think Newfoundland's a little different for that, because the scene here is very contained, and it's not a lot of the time that people from the outside come in. So you do, if you're working professionally in theater in Newfoundland, you will work with some of the same people quite frequently, which is great. I think, again, knowing that you can trust someone immediately because you have encountered them before is very important.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, so far in this series of interviews, we've had the Once, all three members of the Once, and Johnny Harris from Newfoundland, and we had Camilo the Magician from BC, which was a real treat. But the Newfoundland artists, including yourself, I'm sure, have all worked together at some point. And it's quite a wonderful thing to see that. Rising Tide. Johnny was out there for many years in No Man's Land as the young the youngest. Perpetually young Johnny Harris is. He has that look.
Yeah. Actually, I worked with Johnny. Johnny was in the original Under Wraps.
Well, there we are. It's quite amazing to think of the history of shows in Newfoundland alone. I look at my my bookshelf across from me, and one whole shelf is published Newfoundland works, and that is astounding to see. And of course, there's a little chunk of Artistic Fraud's publications, which I should point out are all available through Playwrights Canada Press. If you want to get them, now is a great time to order online. Everything's 25% off on Playwrights Canada Press. This is not sponsored, but I just bought a bunch of plays. So I guess moving on from the kind of original works, before we dive into the Come From Away world, I wanted to talk a little bit about, your journey was kind of fascinating toward Come From Away, in that you did a little bit of Come From Away. You did the National Arts Centre with Tartuffe. You did Stratford, and then Broadway. It was these massive achievements, and it must be wonderful to have that. But two of the pieces I want to kind of jump into are Tartuffe, adapted by Andy Jones, and Shakespeare's As You Like It, which was adapted that season by Gillian Kiley. So what is the joy of doing one of those pieces in a really fresh kind of new, both of those adaptations were set in Newfoundland, so it's quite fascinating. But what was the real treat of being able to do those?
Part of it was to get to go away and do it somewhere else and to encounter new people. As much as I say it's great that we get to work with a lot of the same people, working with new people can be really invigorating because you get to see different ways of attacking things, different ways of interpreting things. Different people think differently, and when you encounter new people, you get to encounter a new way of thinking, and that's never a bad thing. It's always positive because you're going to learn something from that in some way, shape, or form. So getting to go to new places and meet new people and watch them interpret what it is to be in Newfoundland has been fascinating. I sort of ended up being for a while there, I've been saying I was a professional Newfoundlander because I did do the shows that you're talking about. I was a Newfoundlander in Tartuffe. I was a Newfoundlander, and As You Like It, I'm a Newfoundlander in Comfort. So I kind of have carved out a living of being from here.
Mm-hmm.
But those were both incredible experiences. And I came to both of those because of Jillian, because I had known her from Artistic Fraud here in St. John's, and she directed both of those shows, and thankfully she knew my work and felt confident that I'd be right for the parts, so I was very fortunate in that way. But yeah, Tartuffe was hilarious because Ottawa is a bit of it's a government town, but it's a university town, and it's you're never quite sure what an audience is going to like in Ottawa. And they really, really enjoyed it, which is fantastic. And again, just watching people, getting to watch other people watch Andy Jones was always enjoyable because he's so funny.
Yeah, Andy is one of those performers, certainly from Newfoundland, and it shows too, how so many people who worked in Newfoundland on this island creating for so many years, and it only takes one person to see one show and all of a sudden it's like, hey, actually, can you bring this to the National Arts Centre? I want this type of thing to come to Stratford. It's quite amazing. Or on Broadway, of course, leading into where you are now. So the process of Come From Way, it was at La Jolla, and then I think it traveled a little bit before it landed on Broadway.
Yeah, we did La Jolla and Seattle were the first. They were actually together in one contract, basically. We knew we were doing those two stops, but it had sort of shown itself to be, once we had it up and running in La Jolla, everybody kind of went, oh, I think this is actually really good. And so they started talking about whether or not it could have a further life. And they wanted to, putting a show up on Broadway is a really, really risky thing because there's so much money involved in just renting a theater on Broadway. It's tens of thousands of dollars a day to rent a theater. So it's very expensive, and you don't want to go there with something that is going to close in a month because that's millions of dollars that you've just kind of thrown away. So they wanted this to be really road tested before they brought it there, which I think was a very brilliant idea because it did change. Every city we went to, things changed, including New York, but all along the route, there were different additions and subtractions, and just like even a series of lines would just change the order they came in. Like someone would say something 2 lines later than they did, and the difference that even something as small as that can make is incredible. But we did La Jolla and Seattle, and then they all did Washington, D.C., the Ford's Theater there in Washington, D.C., which is where Abraham Lincoln got shot. They still have the little the balcony preserved there. It's very odd. But I was in Stratford while that was happening. But they let me rejoin the company, and we went when I came back. The first thing we did is go to Gander and do the concert versions in Gander, and then we went to Toronto, and then we came here, New York. I forget where I am.
Well, there you go. It's certainly a journey to be a part of that. I think it's wonderful, and it has shown so much how important the message of Come From Way is. I think even now, the message of Come From Way is so
Absolutely.
so important.
Yeah. even during the, we were all in Toronto. It's 5 years now that I've been with this show. We started in La Jolla in 2015. And David and Irene started writing it almost 10 years ago now. But it was a weird sort of coincidence what was happening in the world at the time that we were doing the show. Like even when we were in Seattle, there had been an incident in France. I don't know if people remember, but there was a terrorism incident in France, and people saw our show shortly afterwards and said it was really what they needed to see right now with things like that going on in the world, because it's so hopeful and talks so much about the idea that you can rely on other people, that other people will come through for you in times when you really need them to. Because it feels a bit sometimes like that isn't the way the world works. But it is, and it can be. And then when we were in Toronto, we were actually in our tech rehearsal. So we're like hour 700 of tech rehearsal. And the election was happening in the States, and all my American castmates were so excited at the idea that there would be a female president. And as the day wore on, everybody's mood just kind of went, and we had to actually call it. We had to stop because everybody was too gloomy. But the next day we came in, and the director got everybody together on stage, cast, crew, everybody, and just had a talk with us about how much more important the show feels now, and how he was so glad to be moving forward into this new world with this show and the message of the show. And it feels like that kind of time, like when we all come out of this, and then during it, not when we all come out of it, but during it right now, we all need to be our best version of a Ganderite and be as kind and as generous as we can be with the people in our worlds and in our lives, because it's stressful to be doing what we're all doing right now, because you're stuck at home for what seems like no reason, because no one around you possibly, I mean, some people will have people affected, but it feels like this is somebody else's problem. Why do we all have to stay home? But it's all of our problem, and we all just kind of have to be patient with it and understand that we're doing something very generous on behalf of people who need us to do that. Older people in your life and people who have illnesses and things like that. And it's hard. I'm like a month now in my house, and I'm like, I'm going crazy, but we do what we got to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the message of the show will resonate for people when this is over still.
Yeah, I think, I think it is a wonderful message. Now, admittedly, I cannot listen to Something's Missing at all during this whole time. Right. That one, I am just like, why? Yes, it is. But, I think most of the show is very uplifting and so important to continue getting that message out there that we are in this together, and we will get through it together.
With each other's help. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. As alone as you might feel because you're isolated and you can't actually be with your friends, you can still connect with them and still spend time with them. And it's so important. Other people in your life right now are more important than ever, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, look at Zoom and the amount of meetings. I know, in the Disney showcase last night, the cast of Newsies had a big reunion on Zoom. 50 people who were in Newsies. No one got a word in edgewise, but they were all there. So, I think that's the big challenge with Zoom is everyone wants to say, hi, hey, how's it going?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it shows how beautiful it is that we're in a time that in this quarantine, in this self-isolation, we can still socially connect, even though we're physically distant. And I think that's an amazing, amazing thing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
For myself and these students as well. I think it's really a wild time, but it's an amazing thing that we have the opportunity to still connect in it.
Yeah. His name is escaping me, but the Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield, said this is the best time in history right now for this to be happening, because nobody is really completely isolated anymore because of social media and because of the internet. Like you can actually talk to someone. If this had happened when my grandmother was my age, you'd have to send a letter to somebody and hope it got there, and then hope you got one back. And if you didn't get one back, maybe they're dead and you just don't know. Like, it's incredible the difference between then and now. Like, now you can just text somebody like, "You're not dead, right?" And they'll text you back, "No, I'm not. I'm fine. Thank you very much. I'm okay. I was just in the shower. I'm fine." The instantaneousness is incredible. It's incredible.
And I mean, even, going back from Come From Away, look at the difference in 2001 when those planes landed in Gander. Very few people had cell phones. Now it would have been like, "Hey, I'm in this place. My GPS just said," it's so much faster now. And it's kind of surreal to think it's been 20 years and we've really progressed to a great time to still socially connect while being physically apart.
It's kind of amazing. And I actually have often thought that if this had happened, if it had happened now, or if we had the technology that we have in 2001, it wouldn't have, the Come From Away story wouldn't have happened. Because what would have happened is everybody would be on Twitter going, "I can't believe I'm stuck on this stupid plane. It's hour 8. Oh my God." And posting videos of other people being jerks. And like, all it would be like negativity all over Twitter, as opposed to when you can actually tell everybody every minute of every second of what you're doing, the important things start to stand out a whole lot more.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think it's a wonderful thing that that story could be brought to life in the way that it has. It's such a fast, everything flows, it creates a moment that, and I know so many people have seen it from Newfoundland. So many people from around the world have seen it, including a lot of celebrities. So I have to ask, Petrina, on your Instagram, there's Sean Connery, Justin Trudeau, everyone from politicians to celebrities to singers. So what's it like, being on stage and, all of a sudden backstage is someone that you've watched for many.
Uh-oh, I lost your sound for a second there, but I think we're okay. Can you hear me? No? You can? Okay. It's weird. It's weird when you know ahead of time that they're going to be there, because then your mind occasionally while you're doing the show goes, "Oh yeah, so right now Hillary Clinton is seeing me do this." You just have a weird moment of, that's really weird to know that. That's just bizarre. And sometimes if they're sitting close enough, like I could see Bill and Hillary and Chelsea Clinton, they were like in the third row. Everybody, we all knew where they were sitting, because as soon as one person spotted them, it got passed around very quickly. They're in the third row. So everybody could see them and watch them respond. And you can't let yourself fall into the trap of watching someone else watch the show, because then you're not doing your show. You should be at home doing your laundry because you're not doing your job. But it's weird when you know they're there, but somehow it's better, because then you're more prepared for when you do get to meet them. You have a chance to talk yourself down and go, "I'm not going to make a fool of myself. I'm going to be as well behaved as I can and not blubber and just go, 'Oh my God, I love you so much.'" I think we did know that Tina Fey was coming. And when she came, I was very much like, "Okay, just be cool. Just don't make an idiot of yourself. She's just the coolest, funniest person in the world. Whatever, it's fine." And the great thing about it is that because you're on Broadway, they talk to you like you're a peer, like you're a contemporary of theirs, not like you're a fan on the street. They have just watched you as a performer do your thing, and hopefully they thought you did a good job. So you get to talk to them more on the level of an equal than as just someone who is a fan, which is cool. And they just want to talk to you about the show. So that's always fun.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, yeah.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure. We are going to move now into some questions that have been sent in to me. We're going to start with a question from, once I find her so I can unmute her, Anna Barrett. Anna is graduating this year and has spent this year auditioning at a lot of musical theater programs and has a question for you. All right, Anna.
Hi. Hello. My
I'm
question
gonna
is-
try and find you. Are you got video? Are you videoed?
Yes, I'm videoed.
Okay,
You see me?
try and find you so I can. So while you're talking, I don't feel like I'm talking to a disembodied voice.
Petrina.
Oh, there you are. I got you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. My question was, what would be your best piece of advice for someone interested in pursuing musical theater as a career?
My best piece of advice is very dark, but it's very honest. I always tell anybody who asks me, if there is anything else that you can see yourself doing for a living, you should do it. And only because this is a very, very hard career path, because there's much more disappointment than there is anything else. You'll do more auditions that you don't get a part than you get a part. It's just the math. You're going to audition way more times than you're going to get cast, because you're not going to get cast every time you audition. This just doesn't happen. So you have to really, 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 I always tell people you have to feel like it's a compulsive, like it's something that if you don't do it, it's really bad for you. Like it's something that is more of a calling than anything else. That's my dark bit of advice, but my lighter bit of advice is that you should always represent you. And when I like to go into auditions like I'm doing a one-woman show. Like I get to go in and say to them, check this out. This is going to be fantastic. and really like just do the best job that you can do, knowing that you have that moment, those few minutes to really just show them you, what really is you. And there'll be times when you don't get the part, but it's never because of you. It's always because they have a vision in their minds and you're just not that picture, which doesn't mean that you couldn't do it and doesn't mean that you're not capable of doing it. It just means that they have blinders on to, they have to look like my cousin Edgar in like 1962. Like they have that picture stuck in their head and they want someone who reminds them of that. So you can, more times than not, you're overqualified for the gig, but you don't get it because someone has a vision in their head that they're trying to make come real.
All right. Thank you so much.
Be you. You have a lot to offer.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Anna, for asking that question. Next up, we're kind of a perfect segue into the question that Violet has right now. This is Violet coming. Petrina, if you turn on speaker view. Excellent.
I see her. Yeah. Yep.
Hi. Very nice to meet
Hello.
you. My question was, how was the audition process for Come From Away? How did it work? And how did you even find out about the casting call?
My road to Come From Away is very weird and funny, like most things in my life. It's like one of those oldie-timey Hollywood stories of, it was the girl in the candy store. She was there and the guy saw her. Because I was in Gander during the 9/11 10th anniversary doing a show with Rising Tide, walked into the one coffee shop that isn't Tim Hortons. It's now a Jumping Bean. It used to be called something vaguely Italian, like Giuseppe's or something like that, Giovanni's, something like that. And the only other people in the place was this man and woman. And the guy who was with me, Grant Tilley, who's an actor from Ontario who was working with us that summer, said, "Oh, that's weird. I know those two. They're from Toronto. That's David and Irene. They write musicals." So we went over and said hello, and they were there getting their like little cue cards organized because they were going to go do an interview. And they said that they were there to do research and they were thinking about writing a musical about 9/11. And I was like, please don't. People from the mainland, please don't write a show about Newfoundland. We don't want you to do that. I'm glad I was so wrong. So we just sort of stayed in touch after that on Facebook and stuff. And they saw me perform in Toronto a couple of times with Artistic Fraud. And then I was invited to audition. I was invited to send a taped audition. We still call them taped auditions. You'll hear that. You'll be asked to send in a tape. It means a video from your iPhone or your iPad or whatever device you have. They used to actually be oldie-timey VHS tapes, like used to do that, send it in the mail. But so I sent the tape, and I actually just recently found my old audition in my Dropbox because I was looking for something else, and watched it. And it's so different than what I actually do in the show. It's hilarious. It's all stuff from the show. It's every scene that Bonnie has in the show. Plus, we had to sing a little bit of Welcome to the Rock, and most of the lyrics are completely different, and the tune to the chorus is different. Like, it's incredible how different it all is. But so I did that. I sent that off, and then I actually was asked to come down and audition in New York. So I thought, this is very cool. I'm going to get to go to New York and audition for a show that I'll never get, because I just assumed there's no way I'm going to get this part. But what a great story it's going to be later on when I can say, you know, one time I auditioned on Broadway. So I go down to New York, and I'm sure you guys have heard about this, but you have a book prepared that has, you're basically only really allowed to sing about 28 measures of a piece. They don't want to hear a whole entire song. They want to hear the really good bit in the middle or the really great bit at the end where you have to really sing that high note. They just want to hear the money bit of the song, because tick, 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 they're on to somebody else. So you bring your book, and it has several different songs in different styles, depending on what they're looking for that you can offer to them. So I did my bits. You had to do the same bits that you did on the tape. I did that all again. And then they asked me for, I should tell you first, I get there, and it's at Telsey Casting, which is a huge casting house. And it's this big, giant room that's like a waiting area with kind of tall, what you'd call bar tables that are like you can kind of lean up on. You don't need a chair to sit on, really tall stuff like that. And some benches and coat racks, and there's people everywhere, and they're all going, warming up, making noise, doing their thing. And from behind, there's like 5 doors on the other wall, and each one of them is casting something different. And it could be a movie or a TV show, Broadway play, Broadway musical, out of town musical, anything. And from behind one of these doors, louder than human beings should be able to make noise, the only thing you can hear is someone scream belting or skrelting, as we like to say, "Let it go." And I just thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? This is so dumb. Oh my God. Because I don't make that noise. I just don't. That does not come out of this. So I kind of even had lower expectations when that happened, because I went, oh yeah, there's no way I'm getting this. And I overheard a couple of women talking who, like, this was like the 4th kind of cattle call that they'd been on. We're like, I don't even know why they're calling me out for this. This is, what is it? What's Newfoundland? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, wow. This is a whole other world. And I went in and I did my stuff, and they asked, you know, what do you have in your binder? And I had stuff prepared, but I just sort of, after hearing that "Let It Go," I was like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I said, what I can do and what I think might be fun is a song from Newfoundland. So I sang "The Mobile Goat," which is a song by Joe Morrissey that Tom Cal wrote, that is about a man who swears a lot while he's digging his potatoes, and he thinks a goat talks to him one day, but it's actually the priest hiding behind a rock. It's really foolish, and but catchy and upbeat, and they let me sing the whole song. I thought I'd get a verse and chorus in, and they'd be like, okay, thank you, there's the door. But they let me sing the whole thing. And then the next thing that happened is I had a call back the next morning. They called me in my hotel later to say, can you come back tomorrow? They had told me, you know, be prepared. If you can, stay like long enough for us to maybe do a call back the next morning. And I went back and I did all the stuff again. And I read some stuff, some of Beulah's stuff as well. And this time they had me sing some stuff from Prayer. I didn't recognize that it was a harmony line that I was singing. I was like, this is Make Me a Channel of Your Peace, but it's not Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. It's like they took Make Me a Channel of Your Peace and just lifted all the notes and dropped them 2 lines and said, we wrote a song called Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. But it was a harmony line, and I just didn't realize it. So that was a funny moment. Anyway, that was it. That was my audition process. And because this was very late in their casting process, it was actually later that evening, I think, that they called me and offered me the job. So
Wow.
that was cool. Not having to wait like a week to be told, no, sorry, you didn't get it. Yeah. So yeah, it was weird, but it is a very, very cool experience.
That's great.
It's a long story, but there you go.
No, I love it.
All right, thank you so much, Violet, for that question. We have 2 more questions now. And, Petrina, it's funny you mentioned Joan Morrissey, because that was a real character that you had the opportunity to play in Trinity at Rising Tide for you were well known for that on the island.
Yeah. We toured the island with that show.
And the next question actually has to do with character as well. It's coming from Jackson, who is one of our grade 3 students in the Graham Academy.
Awesome.
All right, Jackson.
We first want to start by saying that we are huge fans of Come From Away, and we love what you've done with the character. We think it's amazing. We listen to it almost every day. It's so great. But we really want to know, do you have any personal connections to Bonnie that help you play the character so well?
I do. I am also completely an animal person. My 2 dogs, one of them's crying very loudly right now because I'm not paying any attention to her, are basically my kids. So I'm totally an animal person, and I completely relate to the idea of people will take care of themselves. We need to do something for these animals. And I think she's got a determination that I really like. That is just very much a know what I'm doing is the important thing. And I relate to that very much. I think it's called being stubborn. And I have that. But I've met Bonnie many, many times, and we're Facebook friends, and she baked me some stuff at Christmas time. Like, she's absolutely a sweetheart. I have a couple of pieces of her art. She's a visual artist too. She kind of does everything. It's amazing.
It's awesome. It must be great getting to work with the actual person that you're playing.
It's really cool. Yeah. It's the kind of research you can't do for mostly every other play or musical that you're going to experience. The idea that you can actually talk to that person and say something like, what was it like? What was your experience like? And have them tell you. When we took the show to Gander to do those 2 concerts, everybody's performance got 800 times better, because they all suddenly understood what Newfoundland was a little bit more, and they understood how small a town it is, and exactly like Tim Hortons. Okay, I've seen it, I've been there. Like, for me, I knew what it meant to say my day starts at Tim Hortons. And for them to get to experience that and to really just sit in a place where they're hearing the accent a lot made it settle in for everybody so much more. They all sounded like drunk pirates from Omaha before. It was bizarre.
Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
All right. Thank you, Kira and Jackson, for that wonderful question. And thanks, Petrina, for noting all of those, I think the Ganderisms that people developed. It would be amazing if every show had the opportunity to, meet the real people, go to the real place. I mean, what a gift that is to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always say too, it's not like when Oklahoma happened, they went to Oklahoma and showed it in every town and went, look what we did, what we made for you. But the producers of our show took this show to Gander to say, we hope you approve. We hope we're representing you well. And thankfully, people did feel that way.
Excellent. So we have 2 more questions before we finish off now. So Lily, once I find her now, Lily Cunning has a question. If I can find her. Just so you know, if you're looking for her camera, it's labeled as Chelsea Bowler. Let me unmute her now.
I got it.
Excellent. So Lily has a question for you. Lily, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm a huge fan, and I absolutely love Bonnie. And my biggest question is, what do you do to get ready before showtime?
Right. Well, it's not a good answer because there isn't a big prep for this show, mostly because we have been doing it for 5 years. So it's very much just in my body at this point in time. But one of the things that always happens is I'm in the dressing room, myself and Astrid Van Wieren, who plays Beulah. We always have really good chats before every show, and we connect while we're there. And the ritual of all of us being in the women are all on one floor in separate rooms, and we all just talk to each other and commiserate about everything and what's going on and what's happening. And we go downstairs and we have a little ritual on stage, on our side of the stage. We're all stage right. There's 6 of us stage right and 6 stage left. And on stage left, we all put our hand, we've been doing this since La Jolla. Everybody puts their hands in and we all do a little, we are here cheer to start the show. So they got jealous on the other side and they started going, we are stage right. So we often listen to hear each other's cheer to see who gets there and who gets to do it first. And we meet and we chat in the wing, all of us who are on that same side together. And when we're standing there waiting for the cue light to go off and for the Boron to start to go out, I do always have a little moment of just taking it in for myself and thinking about, wondering if there are Newfoundlanders out there and hoping there are so that they get to experience it. And I also think about the people who were lost in September 11th, because if it weren't for what happened, I wouldn't be on Broadway. And I think I always have to be aware of that and be grateful to be where I am.
I think that's really quite lovely to ground yourself and to get energized at the same time. So Lily, great question.
It's funny though, I'll follow that up by saying when Rachel Tucker joined us from the UK, one of the first things she asked us is like, do you guys do a group warm-up? And all of the Americans were like, no, my God, have a cup of coffee. What are you talking about? And I said, okay, look, it's an American thing. In Canada, we would have a group warm-up. I don't know why they don't do it, but they don't. They did it in the UK. They had a group warm-up. So there you go.
Yeah, well,
and
there
I've
you go.
I've done it in other shows that we do a group vocal and sometimes physical warm-up together. And it's a great way to, so I don't really like going out and the very first time I see somebody is in the show. I'd rather see them beforehand so that I can have that, I guess the distance between going, oh yeah, that's, Chad who plays Kevin T. But right now I'm seeing him, he's Kevin T. I'm not seeing, oh, there's Chad. I haven't seen him yet today, if you know what I mean. I think you have to see people first so that then you see them as their character when you see them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And having part of the Grenfell program is going to Harlow in the UK, and they were so big on groups and working together, and it was a beautiful thing to see out in the UK, much like here in Newfoundland and in Canada as well. But yeah, it's interesting. Everyone has their differences there.
Yeah.
And next up, we have a question from 2 familiar faces that I think you might recognize. Erin and Mark Smallwood.
Yay! I saw you guys when I was scrolling through earlier. I saw you. Hello.
How are you? So
I'm good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. And it's so great to see you and hear you. And we, as you know, had the pleasure of seeing you on stage in New York. And had a great little backstage tour and got to meet some of your amazing castmates.
But that was around Tony time, wasn't it? Didn't you guys end up going to the Tonys?
Yeah, it was during the Tony.
Yeah. Amazing.
It was wild. It was a fun time. But my question is, how has it changed the dynamic? Because of course, when we saw you, it was the original cast. And that was in 2017. And you've had some changeover in cast members. I'm just curious how that changes the dynamic, because even though you've been doing the show now for 5 years, there's been new faces joining the characters, and what that does to the show and the experience of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of double-edged. It's definitely two-sided. It's like there's an aspect of, particularly this last time we lost Jen Colella, Gino Carr, and Alex Fink all at once. So not only were we losing some people, we lost like 3 key people all at the same time, 2 who had been there since the very beginning and 1 who just when she came in, really won us all over so quickly. So you mourn the loss of your friends who you're not going to see every day anymore. Absolutely. But new people always bring new energy, and they're going to see things in slightly different ways. And the director's been very, very generous with not making people do exactly what has come before. Like, they don't have to just fit into they don't have to just fit exactly into the costume of whoever was there before and do exactly what that person did. They're allowed to interpret in their own way. So when that happens, it's very refreshing to us, because we're hearing things in brand new ways for the first time, and that can be really, really energizing for the show. And then you get to make new friends, and that's always a good thing. It's been really positive. Everybody who's come in has been really, really incredible and different, and just everyone's always so grateful to be there, which is kind of, I think, important. And I know my dog is crying. I know that's not always the case. There are hardened people out there who've been in the business a long time who aren't as grateful when they get a gig. But I think the producers and the director of our show have been very careful to select people who not only fit the characters, but fit the company, who are going to really meld with us as a group of people. So we've been very, very lucky. Yeah, it's been great. And Rachel was the newest one. Rachel Tucker just joined us, and I was disappointed when it was like, we just got her. No, let us do our show, because she's so great and she's so lovely. And yeah.
It's such an ensemble piece. I imagine that it does sort of create this new energy, and even the timing of things can get sort of flipped on its end a little bit with new people joining. So. Oh,
for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of fun. The fun part of it too is because we're not in rehearsals and learning new things, that when someone throws a different timing at you, you're like, oh, wow, cool. I just made a mistake where I never make a mistake, because it's never sounded like that before. So it's really cool. It's really interesting in that way. Yeah. And sometimes it takes a little while, and we have to ask on the other side for, like, can we meet in the middle on this? Because what you're doing and what I'm doing are not gonna ever meet. So you get to go back into rehearsal in that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you
nice
so much.
Nice to see you guys.
Aaron
and listen, nice to see you. And I just want to say, I know you're both physicians, and I just thank you every day for what you're doing. You guys are the rock stars of today's world. You really are superheroes. Thank you.
Thanks, Petrina.
Thank you.
Yeah. Please know how valued you are.
Thanks.
So in closing, I guess for the dog's sake too.
Ovation from my dogs.
Oh, well, there we go. Full salute. So, Petrina, you've now performed Come From Away, hundreds of times. I'm not sure exactly how many times. I'm sure you do know almost exactly how many times. But this is from Sophie Sims, one of our students. What is your favorite moment in the show? You're still muted. Let me unmute you. There we go. Oh.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me unmute myself, but it did let me mute because they were screaming. It's in the vicinity of 1,200 shows, upwards of that I have done. And my favorite moment in the show, is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually the entirety of Screechin', which is kind of funny, because when I saw that in the script at the beginning of all of this, I really just, like, my guts churned, and I went, oh no, a Screechin', oh God. Because I just assumed it was going to be cartoony and potentially paint Newfoundlanders in not the best light, as it often does when it's done by other people. But that was never the case. And one of the great things about Chris Ashley, the director, very early on in the process, he said, that he is from a small town himself, and he wanted everybody to be presented with dignity and not to be caricatures or cartoon versions of people. He wanted them all to have a real genuineness to them. So we were always discouraged from being too big or playing things too broad, or because we're all like, every scene that happens, we're a different character. So if you leave it to the actors, like one is going to have a hump, one is going to have a wooden leg, one is going to be like a 1,500-year-old woman. Like, you'd go over all of the biggest things so that you could physically make everybody as different as possible. And he totally talked us down from that immediately. And he was very, very right. So the Screech In, I love because I get to actually make contact with the most people in the company, because Bonnie does her stuff alone most of the time, or with Doug. I'm talking to empty boxes and pretending there are animals in them. So being actually able to interact with other people feels great. And it's the one time when we're all interacting and we're allowed to be really joyful, because a lot of the time we're spending our time being nervous or afraid or wondering what's next. And there's all this stuff as plane passengers. We're always like, oh, what's happening? What's going on? And as the Ganderites, we're generally just rushing to get things done. So it's the one time when we all do just relax and have a good time. So I look forward to that every night, because there's something that I completely honestly I'm laughing at every night. Somebody will do something that I will catch and go, ha, 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 that's hilarious, every night during the Screech, which is fantastic.
And I mean, 1,200 times, and you could still laugh at it and be there. I think
absolutely. Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
Well,
Totally.
Thank you so much, Petrina, and of course, thank you to your dogs as well for being patient with us, as they could. But thank you so much for giving up your time and joining us, and giving our students a chance to talk and learn and find out new things. So Joel, I'll put you on standby now to disconnect, but this has been a wonderful Q&A with the Graham Academy and the Stage Door and Petrina Bromley of Broadway's Come From Away. And thank you so much, and we'll see you next week with someone new and certainly some wonderful insights. So see you, everybody. Have a great week, and see you, Petrina, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Unmute everyone so they can say
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
Joel's going to end the call.
Bye.